So when we're working with the JVC HM or GY-HM 150, the small, what we call the overnight camera, the tripods are obviously different. It's a much lighter weight tripod. It's called a Libec. Not as efficient as the Manfrotto, but the camera is much smaller and therefore it's, as I say, more lightweight and probably just as easy to use with a couple of handy little functions on it. So the same principles apply here. Basically, we have our camera bar as we have with the Manfrotto. Left to loosen to disengage the teeth. Raise the camera bar up to 90 degrees to the Libec head, and when you're tightening, make sure the teeth intersect here and don't grind down. The base of this comes with a little Libec lock which you pull free. It's a little circular piece of metal that just locks the legs together, so you pull that free. And now you can adjust the three legs like so. Unlike the Manfrotto, the legs are joined together by this central unit here. There is no bar to raise as we have on the Manfrotto. So in this instance, we still have our spirit level. This time there's only one spirit level. It's located directly here beneath the tripod head. But in this instance, you can see there's two sets of wheels. So basically, left to loosen, left to loosen, left to loosen, left to loosen, and same on the final wheel, left to loosen, left to loosen. So again, you can raise the tripod. Following the previous procedure we discussed, generally you would bring this up to the approximate height of your camera operator's shoulder, and basically you will lock the legs once you have done that by turning them right. Obviously, when you're locking the legs, you will make sure that the air bubble in your spirit level is going into the center so that the camera will be level with the horizon plane that it's set up on. So there'll be a little bit of adjusting as you move the legs around to make sure the air bubble is in the center. Other than that, the principles of this are quite easy. In fact, if you get the legs wrong with these Libecs, it's not the end of the world, because we have a central bar here, which you can see. And if I grip this bar and turn it left to loosen, the head on the tripod itself becomes free. So even though the legs may be a couple of inches out, you can actually adjust these to get the spirit level dead center in, or the air bubble dead center in the middle of your spirit level. So as I say, even if the legs are slightly crooked, it doesn't matter. By left to loosen, getting the bubble in the center, and right to tighten, you're set up to go. Same instance in relation to the panning and the tilting. And this time, our lock mechanisms, this large wheel here limits your panning, this large wheel here limits your tilting. So you need to make sure they're open. So we can pan, but this will lock the pan. And we can tilt, but this will lock the tilt mechanism. So in relation to mounting the smaller camera, you can see quite like the previous setup with the larger JVC, we actually have the tripod plate already screwed into the base of the camera. So you won't find the tripod plate on your tripod, you will find it screwed into the camera when you pick up the camera. And you can see by the shape of it there, it just slides in very, very easily into the tripod head, and the large silver wheel on the tripod is then turned to lock it into position. As with the function notes for the previous camera, we're going to be looking at this time obviously the JVC GY-HM 150U camera. So you have your precautions on page 1. We're going to go straight into the two diagrams on page 2, the front diagram and the side diagram of the camera. So here is our camera. Get that in focus for you. And if you look at your notes, you will see two tally lamps. So in this instance, we have a tally lamp here and we have a tally lamp down here on the bottom. Okay, there's then a remote control sensor for a remote control that we don't have, and then exactly as in the same place on the previous camera, we have our AWB, our auto white balance button, located in here under the front. The lens cover, as you can see, is self-contained. It's actually on the lens. So if we turn to the side, swing it around here, you will see the lens release mechanism is this little button here. Basically pop it up, the lens opens, pop it down, the lens closes. The eyepiece is pretty straightforward on the back here. The viewfinder, same as before. Pop out, no lever this time, but it comes out 90 degrees. It rotates 180 degrees, pops back in. Okay. There is a record trigger located just here. Now the on-off switch, we'll jump around a little bit here. The on-off wheel you're probably familiar with from cameras of old. So it's basically an off position, a standby on position, and a cam media position. So you can see the functionality is very similar to the larger cameras that we've looked at already. This little wheel has a blue button on the top here. So you need to push that blue button down to activate it. So push it in, bring it up to standby on mode, and the camera is now in standby on mode. You can see the red light comes on, and you can see that you've got a record trigger directly beside the red light here. The cam media option is the same as on the larger camera. If you want to switch between media mode and camera mode, you simply press the blue wheel in, push it up to cam media, and I've no card in here at the moment, but you can see on my screen that I'm getting a card display, even though there's no media in the camera at the moment. Push that up and down again, and you're back into camera mode. And the pictures come up on the screen there when we're back in camera mode. Now, what else do we need to look at here? Well, on the top we have our zoom lever, and you can see the zoom lever is exactly the same as on the previous JVC. W for wide, T for tight, okay? So widest possible shot, hold down the W. Tightest possible shot, hold down the T. The accessory mounted mic holder and locking knob for microphone, plus the microphone itself, are all in place here. So that's exactly as with the other cameras. And you can see that again, our cable coming down here, we have our input 1 and input 2 for audio. Moving on to page 2 of your notes, you can see the LCD side diagram here. 21 buttons in all. We're going to work our way through those now. So we're mirroring pretty much the angle of the camera, like so, when we look at that diagram. Let me just get that right for you. So let's start in from here. So basically, first up, we're looking here at the built-in microphone on top of the camera. We're looking, which we've looked at already, at the lens cover switch, basically open and close in relation to opening and closing the lens, and what they refer to as the manual ring. I've already called it the focus ring, but it's called the manual ring in the book. The neutral density filter switch, you can see, is slightly different to the one on the larger camera in that we have an off and an on position. So the principle is exactly the same. You leave it in the on position if your primary source of light is electrical light. You put it to on if your primary source of light is natural daylight to compensate for the brightness. There is no 1/16 neutral density filter on this camera. Below this, we have an iris dial for manually operating the iris. Again, the functionality is all very, very similar to the larger cameras. Beside this, number 7 on your notes is the gain button, low, medium, and high. We've discussed this already. It cheats, raises by 9 dB and 18 dB to cheat the amount of light in a shot, exactly as with the other camera. And then beside this, exactly again like the other camera, we have our white balance with the 2 A/B options and the preset option. And do remember that in preset, you cannot set a white balance. So here is your Iris AM, the automatic manual switch. If you remember, on the larger camera, this was actually located on the lens, but it simply means you can choose to go into automatic mode and the camera will do the iris balance for you, or you can go into manual mode and then use the iris wheel here to adjust the iris to your heart's content. Our card slots are in a tricky little location directly under our LCD screen here. You can see slot A and slot B. Principles are exactly the same here. You pop open the door, you can see the 2 slots there, and please remember to keep them closed once you have a card in so that no dirt or grit gets in there. There's then 2 little lights to indicate the status indicator as to which card is active. And we then have, if we move up here, directly above our iris and white balance, you'll see the full auto switch. So you will remember the full auto shooting from the previous camera. So you have the full auto shooting option here. So in other words, the buttons are all the same, they're just in slightly different locations. What we do also have here is an interesting option that's available to you. So I'm looking at switch number 14 here. It is the auto manual focusing mode selection switch. So basically, auto focus or manual focus. If you go into autofocus, the camera will automatically focus for you. Sorry, make sure that's clear. If you go into autofocus, the camera will automatically focus for you. You don't need this ring. If you go into manual focus, you will manually focus with this ring here, okay? Okay, one of the more interesting buttons here is button number 15. You can see it says either zoom or focus are your 2 options. So this is a clever little function. It means that when you're in focus mode,
The ring here functions as a focus ring, as already discussed, but you can equally slip it down into zoom mode, and once it's in zoom mode, then this ring actually becomes a zoom. I don't know if you can see it on the picture on the monitor there, but I'm just zooming in and out now on various items by just moving the ring. The user 1 button on this camera gives you your focus assist. So I know you can't see the screen clearly there, but trust me when I say the screen has gone black and white, and as with the previous camera, anything that's blue is in focus, and provided you are in manual focus here, you can use your focus ring and adjust to make sure that you get what you want sharp and in focus. So user 1 button, focus assist. User 2 button in this instance is basically to set your time code. We've discussed time code already, so you can see the exact same menu that appears on the previous camera crops up. The only difference here is that instead of the blue wheel that we would have had on the previous camera, we actually just have a little push button here, but it's the same functionality: up, down, left, right, and press to set. So basically you would go down to your time code preset, you would basically press it once, time code UB, time code preset, and up card number 1, up card number 1, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, 0 frames, set that back, and your time code, had I a card in the camera, would now be set. If we go into media mode, so back into media mode here, then there are 2 different functionalities for the user, and in this instance in media mode, the user 1 button adds an OK mark, same as with the larger camera. Sorry, refocus that for you. The user 1 button adds an OK mark. So if you can see on the screen, OK mark added, OK mark deleted. And user 2 is a delete function. So you pick the clip you want to get rid of, you press user 2, you're asked, do you want to delete the clip? And you use your little up down roll here to basically go up, delete clip, click, I don't want to delete this, and remove clip. Finally, for this section, buttons 18 to 21 in your notes, you can clearly see here, and you recognize this from the larger camera that we've already become familiar with. We basically have our audio input switch for input 1 and input 2, which, if you recall, we set to mic plus 48 volts. We have the channel 2 input that can choose input 1 or input 2. Because we never use input 2 at the moment, we simply leave it set to input 1, so it duplicates the sound coming in through input 1. And the options here would have been contained behind the LCD screen on the larger camera. In other words, this is the audio select auto or manual switch for channels 1 and channel 2. So the camera will cover 90% of your needs if you leave it set to auto, but if things are too loud, things are too low, and you need to manually adjust, you flick both switches into the manual position, and then obviously do your sound check with your testing 1 2, testing 1 2, while raising or lowering channel 1 or channel 2 and watching how your bars bounce on your LCD screen.